there, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Molly. I'm a knitter based out of the San Francisco Bay Area, where I live with my boyfriend and my cat Lola. And on this channel, I share all things knitting, my recent makes, my inspirations, any sort of crafty thing that strikes my fancy that week. I know I'm a little bit late uploading. I usually upload my videos on Friday, and it is Sunday, maybe Monday when I upload this, so it might not technically be this week anymore, in which case I'm sorry. This is Thanksgiving weekend in the US, and my hope was to get my video out at my normal time. I tried to record at 2 separate times and it really just didn't work out, so I'm hoping third time's the charm. My boyfriend and I were responsible for the turkey for my family's Thanksgiving. I was all set up to record on Wednesday. I was just gonna pop the turkey into the brine really quickly because it had cooled, and instead I spilled brine literally everywhere, so there was a lot of emergency cleanup and dealing with that, some more spilled brine later, bags leaking, just some nonsense. So my day just took like a very hard left all of a sudden. My original plan was just to record on Friday and, you know, be a little bit late, a few hours late maybe a day late tops, but by the time Friday rolled around, I was just so exhausted from 2 straight days of cooking and cleaning and driving around, and it just wasn't really in the cards. But I did record yesterday. It just was totally out of focus when I went back to watch the video for some reason. So here we are. Fingers crossed it goes better today. In any case, today I want to check in on my fall plans and discuss my plans for the early winter. I made a video a couple of months ago where I outlined what I was hoping to knit for the next few months for the fall season, and I want to share how well I stuck to those plans. I wasn't necessarily giving myself these like hard projects that I had to complete or else. It wasn't like that, but I wanted to have a general outline. I have way more things in my knitting queue than I have time to knit. I have a lot of yarn that I've already bought for projects. I had some projects that I had already started that I really wanted to finish. So I wanted this to just serve as a guideline for me and some motivation to work on some of the things that I had been putting off. And honestly, I'm really pleased with how I did. So I think that worked really well. I'll also talk about my plans for the next 6-ish or so weeks, or, you know, the winter time leading up to 2024. I know technically it's not winter until, the 21st of December, but I think for me and probably a lot of Americans, Thanksgiving feels like kind of the end of fall and the signal of the beginning of winter. Like, obviously the weather is getting colder, it's so dark so early now with daylight savings. It's just kind of like, it feels like winter. So I'm gonna call it winter. I'm hoping to have my needles more or less cleared by New Year so I can start with a bit of a clean slate. I'm sure I'll have some sort of long-term projects still going. To the extent that I can kind of have a reset at the new year, I'd like to try that. I've already started thinking about my knitting goals and intentions for next year, outlining some projects I want to do. So I only have a few things that I'll be talking about in terms of winter knitting, but it still might be a little bit ambitious in terms of my goals. My main focus for the next, I would say 1 to 3-ish weeks, hopefully it doesn't go too beyond that, is going to be gift knitting for the Christmas season. I'm not usually too big on gift knitting. I'll do like 1 or 2 things, but this year I have more time than I have money, if I'm being honest, and I also have a lot of yarn. So I'm thinking that that would be a good way to use up some of my stash and make gifts that are lower cost than my usual gifts. But we'll see what I get to from this list. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into my fall makes. So in my fall plans video, I broke my plans down into accessories and sweaters or garments, although they were all sweaters. So I think I'm going to do that again today. The first accessories that I wanted to make were a pair of Musselboro hats. That's a pattern by Isolde Teague, and I wanted to make one for me and for my boyfriend. I made the one for my boyfriend successfully. I showed this last week in my podcast. I have talked about it before. I've still not blocked it, which I said I was going to do, but It's gonna go in the blocking mats tonight. I have a lot of things waiting, so this has to be off my list. This is made in Blue Sky Fibers Woolstock Light in the color Wild Thyme. That's a 100% fingering weight Highland wool. I believe it's single ply. I've spoken about this at length, but I modded it to make the first half that I knit twisted rib and the second half stockinette. I've also spoken about this. This hat needs a little bit more length, which I'm hoping will block into it, but I wouldn't be surprised if I have to end up doing a little bit of surgery once I've blocked it. Notably, my boyfriend doesn't really like cuffed hats, so he wanted this to just be like the correct length without cuffing. So this one is as done as it can be until I block it, but I'm steeling myself for a little bit more surgery on this. We'll see. And I have plenty of yarn, so that should be fine. I didn't finish or even start the muscle burrow for myself, but I actually made another hat for myself, so I'll call that goal mostly accomplished. This is a free Pearl Soho pattern, the classic ribbed hat. This pom-pom is like, oh, I think I need to secure it a little bit better. Anyway, I made this in Good Vibrations mohair merino worsted weight yarn. It's from a farm in North Carolina, and I bought it at Pearl's Yarn Emporium in Asheville. This yarn is 55% mohair, 45% merino. It's super soft, and I have it in the colorway Flowing. And this is one of those single skeins I picked up because, you know, I was in Asheville, I wanted something local, and I was really excited by the idea of being able to get something that was kind of a unique yarn blend. Like, I don't see that many super high mohair content, like mohair merino yarns that are a worsted weight. So I was really excited to get this. It's really soft. It feels great. I love how the hat turned out. And I think I'm fine with the fact that I did this instead, because I was able to kind of cast on and use this yarn that is special to me on a bit of a whim and make something that I'm pleased with. I may make the muscle burrow over the holidays as like good travel knitting, good sort of mindless knitting, but I'm not putting any pressure on myself to finish that. I have other stuff I could probably even do with the yarn I was planning on using for the muscle burrow. That's something that I've just decided to move down my list, deal with that yarn later. If the mood strikes, I'll make the muscle burrow, because I was planning on making it in like a warm toned gray that I think would be like a very good neutral, but it's not like urgent to me. And, you know, I wanted to knit a hat for myself. I did knit a hat for myself. So I'll go ahead and call this one a win too. My other main plan was making the Sunday Morning Wrap by Lisa DeFruscia for Espace Tricot. So this is another free pattern, and it's just this very simple wrap knit in a trapezoidal shape with these panels of twisted rib and stockinette. I made this with another special yarn that I got in Huntsville, Alabama at a place called Sparkle Studio. And this is Bucksnort Alpaca Ranch 100% alpaca yarn in like a worsted DK-ish weight. It was about 200 yards per hank, and the hanks were like somewhere between 3 and 3.5 ounces, I think. I use the colorway Shooter. I've discussed this project quite a bit already. This was one of those fun yarns I was able to pick up that's like very local. This was a really fun, easy project that I think serves this yarn pretty well. And the money for this yarn was kindly gifted to me by my boyfriend's mom for Christmas. So I'm really happy that I was able to make something with it that like really is pretty simple and lets the yarn kind of do the talking. And obviously I know it's like a neutral yarn, but I think it's nice. I think that this is like a good staple kind of shawl wrap to have. I also made 2 cowls and a shawl kind of on impulse as part of a knit along run by Casey Herlihy, or Casey Knits. She's a designer whose patterns I've made quite a few of, and I didn't know beforehand or much beforehand that she was going to be running this knit along, but I was excited to join, and I had a whip that I was able to finish up as a result of this, and then I cast on and finished 2 new projects. The first one, the whip that I finished, was the Slip Snuggle cowl. I made this in Cloudborn Fibers Highland DK, so it's a 100% Highland wool yarn, non-superwash, and it's discontinued, I believe. I bought it in these 3 colors without much of a plan quite a few years ago now, because it was on sale, I think, because it was being discontinued. And I mean, I just really liked how they looked together, but I didn't know what I was going to make with them. And they were each in only 50-gram balls, so it wasn't like I had that much yarn to work with. I'm really happy with how this cowl turned out. I cast it on sometime in the spring, so it languished for a few months as I like finished my PhD. I traveled to Massachusetts, worked on some other projects. I think I made like a very small mistake that I just didn't feel like fixing that much. And when the knit along came around, I decided that I needed to just power through and finish it. It was the perfect opportunity, and I did. And it's like very cozy and warm. It feels really nice, and I think it was a great use of this yarn. I also made, and this I just cast on and cast off since my last video, this is the Faceted Cowl by Casey. I made this in Earl Grey Fiber Co. Darjeeling sock, which is a 75% merino superwash, 25% nylon sock yarn. This is the colorway Moth Wings. I think that this dyer may no longer be in business. I'm not 100% certain. They used to have quite a lot of stock at Black Squirrel Berkeley, which is where I bought this on sale actually, a year and a half ago maybe, and the stock is definitely low, so I don't know exactly what the status of the dyer is. I do really love their yarn colors, so it would be a shame. I've had this in my stash for a while, waiting again for the perfect project. I mentioned a few weeks ago wanting to use this in a cowl, and I'm so happy that I remembered this one of Casey's, which I actually owned and had been thinking of trying to make. It's supposed to go this way, which I'd owned and have been thinking of trying to make for a while. Most of Casey's other patterns, at least the cowl patterns, have quite a lot of like lace details, and I didn't want the lace to get lost in the colors of this yarn, so I'm happy that I remembered this. This is a cowl written for fingering weight yarn held double at a gauge of I think 23 stitches per 4 inches, so a little bit tight. So it's like a very squishy, dense fabric. There's also a lot of slipped stitches in here, which just, yeah, add to the denseness of the fabric. It feels really nice. Bind off edge is flaring a little, so I need to block this. Casey recommends a knit 2 through the back loop, like slip 1 back and then repeat, like one of those stretchy bind offs. And I kind of find that mine always flare quite a bit. So I might end up having to pull it out and do like a normal bind off, which would be fine. So I just really love how the colors look in this one. I think that it is very like visually interesting and there's a lot of colors, but it still reads relatively neutral because a lot of the colors, there's, you know, like pinks, I guess, but it's a lot of tan, brown, gray colors that I think are pretty versatile. So this one, along with my boyfriend's Musselboro, have to be blocked tonight. The last thing I made in the accessories category was this Lost Horse shawl, also by Casey. I used Ancient Arts fiber, Little Nettle Soft in the colorway Orange Tiger Tabby, and I got this at Fiber Artwork in Huntsville. That's a superwash merino nettle blend, fingering weight yarn, and it's a little bit on the heavier side for a fingering weight. It has under 400 yards per 100 grams, which I tend to think of as kind of being like lower end of the absolute norm. Obviously, it depends a lot on the fiber you're talking about. I was looking for a pattern among Casey's library for this yarn. I was thinking it might be good for a shawl, and I'm glad that I found this one. It's a relatively new pattern, and it's also written for under 400 yards of fingering weight yarn, so it ended up being almost perfect. I had to bind off a few rows early before I did the finishing touches to this, but I think it turned out looking very nice, and I think that it was a good use of this yarn because even though it's, you know, a pretty lacy pattern and the yarn is variegated, it's all within the same sort of color family, so it doesn't get super lost. I just talked about this quite a bit in my last video, so I'll go ahead and link that if you want to know more. Overall, I'm really pleased with how I did. I checked off basically all the boxes I wanted to, and I was able to use a lot of those special single skeins I have in my stash. I have quite a few of those, and a lot of times I have either a little bit of like decision paralysis when it comes to deciding what to do with something because it's so special, or I just end up forgetting about it in one of my stash bins for a little while. And it was really nice this fall to kind of find myself being drawn towards a lot of these single skeins and finding something that I was excited to knit with them that do feel like they do the yarn justice. I'm hoping I can carry some of that energy with me forward, so it's possible you'll see some single skein projects with random skeins that I have in my stash from particular indie dyers or my travels. Sometimes I think I just want to be able to cast on something that's kind of like low stakes, easy to knit, quick to finish, and something that can kind of like check off that box of like, I used something in my stash, like the whole amount that I had. And of course, the things that I have more than a single skein of in my stash obviously take up more room, but it still feels good. Overall, I would say that my accessory game was pretty strong for the fall. I have 3 sweater projects to kind of quickly go over. Again, I've talked about a lot of these in depth before. The first is my Lodestar by Kirsten Rivetta. This is a pattern from Pom Pom magazine. It came from the summer 2021 edition, and I've been planning it since around the time that issue came out. It turned out so well. I made this in Valley Yarns Northfield, which is a DK weight blend of merino, alpaca, and silk. That was a yarn that had been in my stash even longer than I've been planning to make this pattern. I had originally intended it for something else. That was a self-drafted project that kind of just fell off of my list of desired knits, and I wasn't really intending to make anytime soon. So I'm so happy that I found this pairing as a possibility. Someone else had used this yarn on Ravelry, and when I was looking for what to do with the amount of yarn that I had, I was just so excited to see that I had hopefully enough of this. And I ended up having more than enough, like I said, to finish this the way that I wanted. I had some wonky stuff go on with the stitch counts and the star lace patterns. That was kind of a whole thing, but in the end, I think it turned out really nice. It blocked out really well, and I'm so happy that I finally like did this sort of what was starting to feel like a bit of a bucket list knit, like this knit that I'm like, I'll knit that someday, I'll knit that someday, and someday has now come and gone, and I have the finished garment. I've been talking about this for over a year in my videos. This has been something I have been like considering and planning and thinking about for like forever, so it just feels nice to have it done. The other thing was my Be Thankful cardigan by Lily Kate France. This had its own whole saga that involved losing yarn chicken, ordering more yarn to the wrong address, not having that yarn show up for like 3 months, ordering more yarn, forgetting what needle size I used. It turned out to be a whole thing. So I finished the remaining sleeve that I had on this. This is knit in Knit Picks Wool of the Andes Tweed in the colorway Welly's Heather. And I think this is the second sleeve I did, but I'm not entirely sure. They actually look like I took good enough notes about how I modified the sleeve, because that was the other thing. I made modifications. So it was just like a really stressful project that I had been kind of dreading trying to figure out. But I just sat down a few days ago and I said, Molly, you talked about this in your fall plans video, wanting to finish this. You want to wear this sweater. Sit down, just pick a needle size, make a guess, and go. And if it doesn't work, frog it. So that worked actually pretty well. I started out with a US 7, and I'm pretty sure it's this one because I think the first round or two I used the 7 and it was looking a little tight, and I just didn't really want to frog it, so I just switched to a US 8, and that seemed a little bit better. I used, I think, a US 5 for the cuff. I don't really know. I've already forgotten again, which is probably not good. I'm just happy that I finally got myself to finish it. I think that this is such a nice sweater. It's a fun neutral, kind of like I was talking about with my faceted cowl. Like, it has all these different speckles in it from the tweed, but they're all sort of in this neutral palette. So even though it is this like charcoaly heathered color, it has quite a good amount of visual interest, and I think is a cardigan that I'll get a lot of wear out of. So obviously I need to sew in the ends and block it and put on the buttons, but this one is again well on its way, and I've kind of finished that one thing that I needed to do, gotten over the hurdle of the sleeve, and I've already forgotten, like I said, which one I knit when. So even though they're maybe not exactly the same or perfect, they're close enough that I now don't know, and I don't think anybody else would notice that there's a little bit of a difference. Because there's always a little bit of a difference, right? And it's just not as noticeable when you wear it anyway. The last thing that I was hoping to finish, work on, whatever, I didn't finish. So this is kind of, I guess, my transition into my like talking about my winter makes and plans. So that's the Shifty by Andrea Mowry. I talked about this, like I said, in my fall plans video. I've also talked about this for years. It's one of those other things I've had on my radar for a while. I'm happy that I have started to cast it on. The colors of this have been a whole saga of me trying to figure out what I like the look of, what I want to make, and I'm using Cascade Heritage Wave for this. That is a 75-25 superwash merino nylon yarn. All I have, and all I've ever shown you of this, besides swatches, is the collar. I have not made any progress since the last time I said I hadn't made any progress. So it's been like over a month because I was focusing on some of the accessories, which is totally fine. But this is something that I would love to finish this year. It's been on my list for a long time. It's been on my radar for a long time. And I finally have a color combination that I'm excited about. If you remember, I bought quite a few skeins of Cascade Heritage a little bit ago to try to test the colors out, and I will be using these three. This is From Bottom to Top, Stained Glass, Woodsy, and Blues. I'll be focusing maybe on some of the gift knits that I've started before I really dive into this super hard, but this is going to be probably the big focus sweater of the season because I just want it to be done. Not that I'm not excited to do the knitting, but it's an all-over mosaic color work. Technically the pattern's written for sport rate, it's written for spin cycle, dyed in the wool, but I mean I'm knitting it and fingering, and that is a pretty like light sport. So it's gonna be an undertaking, and I think once I'm in the groove, once I get through the short rows, which are knit in stranded color work, I'll be like getting in that groove you can get in when you're just doing the repeats and you're used to it and you're chugging along. But I haven't gotten there yet, and I am admittedly a little bit intimidated still. So this sweater is gonna be finished by the end of the year. Yeah, I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna say that, and I'm gonna try to do it. The other sweater that I want to make for myself is the September sweater by Petite Knit. This was one of my make nines for the year. A few of these were in one way or another. This is the yarn I'm gonna use. It's Simply Wool Twist worsted weight by Knit Picks, and it's in the colorway Winkle and Wanda. and this is a 100% non-superwash wool. It's 218 yards for 100 grams. So this yarn, they have this like Simply Wool line that's like eco-friendly, natural colors yarn, I guess, non-superwash treated, etc. And I believe that they have discontinued the twist line, at least for the wool. It's a little bit murky to me because it has this like barber pole striping, as you can see, and Winkle and Wanda are like the two colors that are twisted. So I believe they have a Winkle that's like a solid color of one and a Wanda that's a solid color of the other, and a few other solid colors. But I think this like specific line of only barber pole striping colorways is gone. However, they might still have some twisted barber pole striping colorways under the wool, Simply Wool worsted category on the website. But I don't think this specific yarn is available. That's a lot of maybe confusing stuff, but it doesn't matter. I'm gonna be using this yarn. I bought this, I think because it was on like a pretty steep sale, and I was like a sweater quantity of like nice wool for pretty cheap. And I've worked on the September sweater before. I did a very bad job of it. I used kind of a not very nice yarn that didn't work that well, and at the time I was really bad at fixing brioche mistakes. I'm much better now. I've knit a few brioche projects, most of which I frogged actually, but I did knit the Current Mood Shawl by Leslie Ann Robinson, or Knit Graffiti, and that had a lot of brioche in it. It was 2-color brioche, which I think kind of helped me figure out like how to fix brioche a little bit better, although I should be able to do it pretty well in 1 color anyway. And yeah, I think this is something that I would also like to finish by the end of the year, but 2 sweaters, one of which is very complicated and one of which is brioche that grows kind of slowly, might be a little bit ambitious, so we'll see. I think the shifty will be my main priority because I've already cast it on. I haven't even wound this yarn yet, so this may end up being kicked down to 2024, but we'll see. The last thing I anticipate working on in 2024, something I'll probably bring as like a main travel knit, and that is this botanic shawl. That's a pattern by Stephen West, and I'm making it in Stroll Gradient, which is a fingering weight sock yarn. It no longer is available like this in this 100-gram cake of Gradient. It is available in a few different other compositions though, one of which is like the basic Stroll, available in 50-gram skeins, and this one is called Jackrabbit Heather. And you might be able to tell that I made a lot of progress on this and frogged it. I've never talked about this on the podcast because it was mostly something I was knitting during my PhD hiatus. I brought this as my main knit, maybe my only knit, for my trip to Massachusetts in May and June, and I actually got really far on it, mostly during that trip, but I also had COVID on that trip, and I think at some point during my like COVID knitting I messed it up, and I like added or dropped a stitch somewhere, I don't really recall which, and I ended up frogging back really far. I frogged all the stuff that's wrapped around the cake like this. I frogged, I think, all of this. Like I have the rest of the ball here, and I think I just like, I tried to kind of wrap it, but because I was center pulling, it just wasn't working. So it's it was a lot. It was really discouraging because I'd like gotten through like 2 whole colors and then I had to frog it back. But this is a pretty good travel knit. It's relatively intuitive. It is fingering weight with 2 skeins, so it lasts like a good while. I have a couple stitches I have to deal with and pick up properly with stitch markers here, but I'm not like super pressed about finishing this before the new year, but I think that this will be something you'll be seeing over the next couple weeks as I'm traveling and finishing things up, because I think that this will be a good knit to just like bring around with me. That's it for my like knitting for myself goals, I guess. I have a few other things I want to talk about in terms of gift knitting. So most of these are for members of my boyfriend's family. My family has not traditionally been too big on knitted gifts, although if you are my family member and you're watching and you want something knitted, I am always open to requests. So I'll start with the socks I've actually cast on, because I'm not like worried about finishing them, but I know that I need to like put in some time on these if I want to have them done for Christmas. This pattern is the Broken Rib Broken Record sock by Left Sock Best Sock. I believe I got all that information correct. I will make sure to put it on the screen. And I'm knitting this in Golden Sheep Fibers BFL sock. So I talked about this yarn last week in my podcast because it was an acquisition. This is a blend of 75% superwashed British Blueface Leicester and 25% nylon in the colorway Gingerbread. This is a gift for my boyfriend's mom that I'm working on. I'm making the size large. She is like tall and has larger feet than me. I'm small and my feet are little. So that's the other thing, is I can crank out socks for myself really fast, because even if I'm making like close to full height socks, I only use 50 grams, but socks for other people are a different story. This is just a basic broken rib sock. It looks really nice. I like a twisted rib sock. I like a rib sock in general. I think they fit me better, and I think they have a little bit more leeway for gift knitting. So this is kind of like a big thing that I am trying to chug along on. This is the main thing that I'm like worried about knitting for a gift. I want to be able to have this done, and then I'll probably start focusing on some of the other things once I've knit at least one sock and probably cast on the second, because I don't want to fall prey to second sock syndrome here. I just really love this like rich brown color. I kind of hope there's a little bit left so that I can have some, because Golden Sheep Fibers is unfortunately closed. They are not dyeing anymore, and my local yarn store, Black Squirrel Berkeley, has some stock of this left, but I don't know how much. So, and with a name like Gingerbread, I think it might be going during the winter season, but we'll see. The other thing I'm gonna make, and the last of my plans, is a baby sweater. And that sweater will be a mix of two patterns, because I have a very specific vision in mind. I want to make a shawl collar cardigan for my boyfriend's nephew. He's like close to 1.5 years or so. I've been looking for toddler patterns that meet that specification. I found one that I kind of started, but it's knit flat, and I just like couldn't. I basically quit immediately. Not because it was knit flat, I don't think. Or all cardigans are knit flat, I guess. But it was like knit in different pieces and seamed more. That was more, I guess, the thing, that it was knit flat. I'm going to be using this yarn, this Superwash Wool of the Andes Bulky, in the color Bamboo Heather. There are 137 yards per 100 grams. So that's like, I would say, slightly light, bulky, a very heavy Aran maybe. I'm gonna make Audrey's First Day by Elizabeth Smith. I'm going to try to add a shawl collar using the specifications of the Baby Sophisticate sweater. So I've made Elizabeth's First Day twice before. Only one of them was actually gifted because the other one got weirdly discolored. It's just a V-neck cardigan. It has a ribbed collar that you add after with the button band, and it does have eyelet raglan increases that I think I'm going to change to make one left and right. I have never knit a shawl collar, and the Baby Sophisticate only comes in, I think, like sizes up to 12 months, so not going to be big enough for the baby. But my plan is to like do the math and figure out some percentages to try to make the button band like percentages all kind of the same in terms of like where the shawl collar starts to grow based on the Baby Sophisticate, using the rib stitch probably written into the Audrey's First Day, and using like the stitch counts, but just like adjusting the numbers so my proportions are the same or so. I may have to do some fiddling around with it, but I don't know why I just really want this to be a shawl collar. I don't know. I'm gonna do it, and we're gonna see how it goes. And I guess my worst case scenario is I will just make the Audrey's First Day with the make one left and right raglan increases, and I'll have a normal collar, and just the shawl collar can go. But we'll see. So I'm kind of excited to like noodle around with that. I think it'll be fun. I think that this yarn will work, even though that's technically an Aran pattern, because I think I was knitting at around like 15 stitches per inch with this in my swatch. Like I have a swatch I've made flat of stockinette. I've like done my due diligence, because I was originally going to use this for something else, which I swatched for, but then decided against using it for. I'm excited to see how this goes. I'm a little bit worried. I think I have like a pretty solid grasp of how you would shape a shawl collar using short rows. I assume that's what this pattern does. I haven't actually looked too closely at the Baby Sophisticate. If it isn't gonna serve my needs, I guess I'll maybe have to figure out a different way to do it, or I'll just have to pick something else. I think it'll be a fun challenge. Like, I'm interested in sort of working on doing more self-drafting, more garment construction of my own. I like a good little math problem. I'm a scientist. This kind of experimentation is fun for me. So we'll see how it goes, and I'll definitely be reporting back. So that's all that I have for you this week. I'd love to know if you are the type of person who sets knitting goals for yourself. Did you have fall plans? How did you do on your fall plans? Have you made winter plans yet? If you have anything knitting that you want to talk about, or crafting in general, I'll accept crochet and other fiber arts, of course. Please leave a comment below. I'd love to have a little conversation about knitting. I think it saves the sanity of everyone around me if I talk about it more with people who are also equally interested in the topic. If you enjoyed hanging out with me today, don't forget to give the video a like and consider subscribing. I release videos usually at least once a week on Fridays. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you next week. Bye.